Angie Caney from Tinks Treasurez, and I've got a fun project to share with you today. So if crafting is your thing, like this video and subscribe to the channel. It will really help me out. So I am actually remaking this video because the file became corrupt. So what I have started to do is that I have the new waterfall dies from Anna Griffin, and these just came out on HSN a week or two ago. And this is used to make a waterfall card. Now, I've used these in the past, and I usually end up putting them into mini albums. She has them used in a full scrapbook page as well as a standalone, which I had never thought of, but this looks very cute. You could hand it out as like a little memory keepsake. But I was inspired to want to be able to put this into a mini album. So therefore, my next thought was to use Anna's album making dies and folder. So this came out several years ago, and it was designed to be able to use with, like, you could use this and make these on your own using 5x7 cards and the dies and folder that came with it. Or I believe she mentioned using like existing cards as more like keepsakes. But then when you put this together, so you get 6 little spines, tabs coming off the spine that you can use with your cards, and then you assemble and you've got like a little album. But using just cards and cardstock, it's going to be fairly flimsy. So I want to make this into an actual mini album. So I'm going to do that today, just using blank cardstock, some ivory cardstock 5x7 size, and I'm going to assemble this. And my inspiration for this is that in this last year and a half, 2 years, I started crocheting. So I've kept a lot of my wrappers from the crochet, the yarn, and I've taken some pictures of the project. So I just kind of want to journal my progress as well as maybe putting some notes that I use for crocheting. But you could use this as an actual mini album, or you could even use it into some type of journal. So today that's what I'm going to be working on. And then the paper I want to use is some of different stuff, different cardstock. So I'm going to be using paper out. So for the first part, we need to cut 2 of these base layers, and they measure out to be 6.5 by 7.5. And I think I covered this in my previous video that shows. Start to assemble. Here's what you're going to come across. So because this is 6.5 by 7.5, and this is just my sample that I made up first to work with, is that your 5x7 card, it's quite a difference in size, so it's not going to work exactly with these pages like I would do in a more traditional mini album. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the cover big enough to hold this. I'm going to put this inside the back page, and then these will be my pages to go with it. And I believe what I'm going to do for this project is So you're going to have your base layer. So I'm going to use this paper as my base layer because this page it's going to sit stationary in your album. So I'm going to use my ivory paper as the bottom base that's going to sit inside my mini album because you're really not going to see that. You're going to be pulling on the waterfall. So I'm going to put my pattern paper in here. This is going to be stationary and it lines up over top of it, so you're really not going to see it that much anyway. So to save some pattern cardstock, I'm going to use just some ivory cardstock or whatever color base you want to make for your album. I know a lot of people like to do black albums or the brown craft paper, and then just use your pattern paper to cover it. Your score line, and there's kind of a space in between there, so you want to take advantage of that and kind of give yourself a gusset. Because you want some space for your card mechanism to slide through. So when you go to put that on, you're going to need a little space like that, so don't make it tight. Back and forth, and then I'll give you that little gusset right in there. And then for the next die, that's going to be the piece that is pulling, and you're going to have your little score lines on there. This is where you're going to do your pictures. I'm going to do this in ivory as well, just because you're not going to see so much of that paper. You're going to be covering it all up like this. You will potentially see the bottom of it. When you get to about there. But you could even put another picture under there or put a small piece of paper in there. So I'm following the instructions. about flipping the belly band over and adding a piece of cherries. And then it says flip over and adhere to the band to the back of base layer 2, about 1.25 inches from the bottom. So the first time I was making this, I put this together so that it was like that, which it totally worked. But then if you're giving it to someone, you're going to see that and it looks messy. However, I mean, and that's kind of how it's illustrated when it's done. Finish the card by adhering the signature card to the back. So you don't see the belly band back here. So I'm not quite clear on these instructions, but what I'm going to do is how I made it, which is I used the belly band and I put glue on the back of the belly band, and then I glued it to the front of base layer 2 so that you don't see it back here. So that's what I'm going to do again. So, and that's kind of where you want your gusset, is that you want to give it space to be able to slide in and out. So, and I'm going to use wet glue just because I don't want this falling apart later on. And also, like when you're assembling this, so the 1.25 inch part, I don't know if you can see it, but like I measured, there's a little pencil mark there, but I ended up putting it just slightly above it, which worked out because what you're gonna do is use the top base, excuse me, the top layer is going to glue down on there. So you kind of want it, and you're going to use this as a tab to glue down to make this mechanism pull. So you're going to glue this down on top. You're going to center it as best as possible. And then you're going to send this through the belly band. And then that top piece is going to glue down to that. Okay, so for base layer 2, we want to measure from the bottom 1.25 inches. And I've made these in the past in other albums I've had, and I wanted to be able to show it, but I always haven't had that potentially moving. But I went ahead and bought this die set because in the past you need to go and measuring the scoreboard out, and then you have to score and fold and cut. And I just thought I wanted to give this die set a try so that you don't have to go through all of that. It will already be lined up for you. And then while that dries, we can go back to our top layer, which is going to have all these score marks, and you're going to want to fold several times back and forth on these score marks because you want them to be able to move freely once the mechanism is put together and it's inside that belly band. And when you pull, and you're going to have your pictures on here, you want it to be able to pull freely. And then here's where you want to put in base layer number 1 in your belly band. So that it looks like this. So I glued my belly band on top of base layer 2. And then your top flap is going to come up. You want to make sure your 2 bases are flush together. And then here's where we're going to glue that top tab or that top layer onto this belly band. So I'm going to put some glue back here. And then once this dries, you'll be able to pull on it. And here's where but these are my favorite pictures, and this is where I'm gonna. I don't have any pictures to put onto this video. Just to give you an idea how you're going to want to line these up. So on your score line, you want to go just up to the score line on each one. And then that's where you're going to put a bead of glue right over here in each section. And then when you pull, that's where you're going to get your flipping motion. So that's going to dry. I want to go ahead and start with the next section. And that is the album. And the first part will be doing the spine. So this is the main die that you're going to use. Okay, so I know this thread has been around a while, so I don't know how many people got around to using them. But I do like this because it has all your score lines already for you, so you just need to fold on these score lines. Okay, so here's how it's gonna go. So she has these little notches, which makes it really nice. So on the back side is where you're gonna put your glue in this little valley, this little trough area, and then you're going to glue those pieces together. And you're gonna do it in each of these little notches. So I'm gonna start that. And then I have these little clips that I like to use for everything. I'm just gonna hold it together while it sets up. And then you can come down here and do the next set. Okay, then you can open it up and let it dry. It shouldn't take too long. But this is going to be your spine. And then this is where you're going to add your pages on the inside. And this is going to go down. There's a flap on each end or a tab on each end, and those are going to go to the covers. This front piece here and this back piece here is going to be where you're going to add that to your cover. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to work on the cover. Now, what I did in the first video attempt was show that I save the packaging that these dies come in. And this is from the Waterfall Die set. So I'm going to disassemble this. I'm going to make it so that the waterfall piece that we just made fits on the inside. So I'm going to get a front cover and a back cover out of this. And if I line it up just right, I might be able to get my spine. And if not, I have another scrap piece that I can cut my spine out of. But for this project, I'm going to make the covers 7.5 by 8.25. So 7.5 by 8.25 tall. one I started a while back. I never finished. But you can see how it overlapped like that, and that's going to be my goal, is that it's going to cover the spine and then go onto the cover a couple inches. So and then you're also going to want to make sure that you have a space in between your cover and your spine so that you have room to bend. And I say this like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Making mini albums has been around for many years now, and you may have better techniques than me. If so, I'd be happy to hear them in the comments. But here's how I believe I'm going to line it up. So we're going to have, what is that, maybe an inch and a half onto here, and that leaves me about, let's see if I line it up. If I do a ½ inch. Okay, so I'm going to glue these together and then come back and put it on the covers. And then just so I don't have to come back and trim this off, which I could have done before I glued it down, I'm going to just center it. I'm going to have a full amount of coverage inside the album, but that's going to be okay. It's not going to hurt anything. So here you can start bending your paper, working it so that it doesn't tear. And here you've got 2 layers that you're going to be bending and pulling on. And then you're going to want to miter your corners. Now I'm working with a lot of paper here just because I didn't trim it back. So I got 3 out of my 4 corners to miter perfectly. And this one I'm just a hair short, and your paper on the inside is going to cover that up. But what you can do, use the piece that you cut off and put in there, and you'll never know. So I'm going to put my edges or my end pieces down. I'm going to glue them down first, and then I'll go back and put these pieces in. And I think I'm just going to go in by hand and cut some of this away. Even if it's not a perfect cut, you're not going to see that anyway, but you won't have so much bulk to work with. Okay, so I'm just going to start gluing down and use my nifty little clips to hold it in place. Okay, so now we can come back and add in our spine. And then here's where I'm going to glue down my flaps. Now it worked out good, but I should have pointed out the purpose of measuring these up further to take up enough space so that I put this between the two covered edges. However, and it'll be totally fine. However, logically, had I measured out a little bit better, this should have gone in the center between these two. You really won't notice it or see it. And then anything like this little gap here and this little gap here, that's going to be covered by your pattern paper to cover the inside of your covers. So that'll all be covered. Okay, I've let this dry, so I'm going to take my clips off. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add my pattern paper to the inside of the covers and put in my waterfall die. And then put this video together